Hey, what's up, Canada and beyond? Welcome back. Wherever you're tuning in from, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. If you're new here, I hope you guys enjoy our guests here tonight. If you're not new here, you'll know what to do. Please smash that share button, give this a like, help us try and get outside of Trudeau's reach. You're going to be seeing that we're streaming out to multiple different platforms, maybe some that y'all aren't very familiar with. And this is really literally we're creating an environment outside of their jurisdictional reach so that when, as the insanity becomes even more and more unsustainable, we've got a place where it's not going to affect us so much. So what we're all doing here together is something collectively and as a community. So you guys, every last one of you that has been here with me from the beginning or on, and it just dawned on me, I'm such a numbskull about this. We actually had my 5th anniversary since launching What's Up Canada, and that was April 5th. So head down, bum up. That's what we're doing, trying to eliminate some of the noise, get to some of the news, the information, the facts. And there's enough of the doom loop guy stuff going on out there, the sensationalism, the emotionally driven narrative. I'm really trying to focus on bringing you guys people to listen to and connect with that have real world answers, solutions, because I think the truth is ultimately, at the end of the day, what will set us free. So earlier this week, we had an amazing discussion with Karine and Randy about freedom of information requests. And it was just kind of the universe, I think, shining on us that tonight we have 2 other special guests joining us that have something else along the same mindset and thinking, freedom of information. And thanks, guys, for finding the time to join me here tonight. I know this isn't your guys' universe of what you guys spend your time doing and your lives doing, but I'm kind of lost here a little bit in how to actually start into this, because there's so much that I want to get into. But to start with, you guys have both been involved in serving people. Rick, for many years in the police services, and there comes a point in time, I guess, undeniably, where what protect and serve means something different to you, the officer, versus the corporation that you're employed by. And understanding that, I think, is something that Canadians need to understand right now. I'm very, very nervous by the atmosphere and the narrative out there in law enforcement from the top down. Most people out here are aware already of the RCMP report, talking in a way that makes Canadians sound dangerous because they're disgruntled, having figured out that we're going to own nothing and not be quite so happy about it. I think we need to take a hard look at and not be, as a group, as a society, be so intellectually dishonest about the discussion. And nobody wants to live in a world of anarchy, and this is something we need to have a more focused discussion on, education on. And what you guys have done in Alberta is unique out there, I think, and establishing some of that. So thank you for humoring my long diatribe, and welcome to the show. But to start everything off, give you guys a little bit of a chance to let the community know who you are, where you come from, what you're made of, and how we end up here where you guys are serving the community and the people in a way you probably never imagined you would have been forced to do in a lifetime, a long time ago, and not so far away. Natasha, may as well start with you.
All right, so I'm not a police officer. I am an investigator from the civilian side, so regulatory, healthcare professional investigations. I was also an investigator at the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner for a number of years. And my other background is I've come from the occupational health and safety, victim services side quite intensely, and out of the medical community, where I established the heart valve procurement bank back in the 2000s. So, I've come out of that side of it, and after spending my time in the regulatory world, you really see how regulatory governance failed during this time frame. And after I've left Karna, which was my employer there, which is the Nurses College, I just started helping people. So helping regulatory professionals who were having discipline, families who were seeking answers and not getting answers or having an advocate in the system, reviewing autopsy reports with people, helping in all types of avenues of providing documents or research documents for legal proceedings, that type of avenue. And that's when the Edmonton City police officers and civilian members approached me. So let Rick kind of take over from there.
I have to add a little, correction, notification out there, and this is exactly reaffirming why this show is so important for people to understand. Wayne is not the expert. Wayne has no answers about anything. Wayne is very easily mistaken. I encourage everybody to do their own research. Mine was obviously flawed in my understanding when I arranged this show. I arrange this based on the context of what you guys are going to talk about, the evidence. And I made the assumption that you were an officer rather than an investigator. So thank you for setting the record straight on this. The information and facts are important. That's why I go to the sources. So that's why you guys are here. So thank you for corroborating and fixing that, Natasha.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'd function too well in that area because I'm not I'm not one for orders. So I like being in my own office doing my investigations.
Well, you're a critical part of the puzzle, no doubt. So, Rick, give the folks a little bit of who you are. You're the only image that I could find, because you're not really a social media influencer in any capacity, was you in uniform. So I hope I didn't overstep anything in what I was projecting on my platform with that. So.
We're going to talk about that photo shortly. I've got a bone to pick with you, but it's a great segue into a topic that we'll have later on here. But for now, I just want to remind you who I am for your audience. I was an Edmonton police officer. I ended up as a staff sergeant in their West Division. I was, and to borrow your words again, thank you, Wayne. I use that term intellectual honesty all the time. To be intellectually honest, I was fired by the Edmonton Police Service. So they say I was suspended without pay, and then that I retired, but I was bled out. I was forced out of the Edmonton Police Service for what I call Orwellian wrongthink. I was asking questions in my division about the disclosure of the employees that I worked with. So I would have been in command of a division on a shift supervisor, really, with about 60 to 70 people per shift. And it came to my attention that they were being, like, bullying is not the right word anymore, horribly discriminated against. I gave testimony at the National Citizens Inquiry where I described what was called a shame room in my division. So cops are trained investigators, and they figured out pretty quickly who was not, who had not taken the COVID drugs. And of course, the policies of the chief of police of Edmonton was that those who didn't take the COVID drugs wouldn't be allowed to eat in the lunchrooms. Of course, you could go out and arrest bad guys all day and wrestle with people in the back seat of your cruiser, but you couldn't come back to the division and eat together. This was a clue to me that this is not about people's health anymore. And I was looking to leadership to stop that bullying, let's call it. And it came to my attention that those who didn't take the COVID drugs were forced into what was being locally called the shame room. They couldn't eat lunch with their friends. They go eat in the shame room. Okay, so I got mad about that. And I stomped my feet, basically, even though, and I'll remind you viewers, I was tricked into taking or coerced into taking the COVID drugs myself. But when I saw my employees being subjugated to some horrible treatment, I spoke out against it. I made another fatal error of asking Canadians on a day off, on one of my days off, in civilian clothes, to remain peaceful. And somehow that made the news, and the executive officer team of the Edmonton Police Service decided to suspend me without pay, knowing that I couldn't afford to fight them, and they ended up taking a partial pension. So that's how I ended up here today. A good segue that you had with Natasha earlier, though, is a brief recap. And I don't like talking about the SWAT teams. I did have a fantastic career. Like, I'm not here to complain about that. I spent the majority of my career in frontline policing, moved into firearms training and the gun teams, and then I was promoted through the ranks on our local tactical teams. Your viewers will know them as SWAT teams. There's a joke amongst the SWAT teams, and I hate this reference, don't get me wrong, but the SWAT cops in the movie SWAT said they're the guys that the cops call when they need help. Well, here we are today with Natasha. Who do the investigators call when we need help? And so her service can't be understated here. She's in a position, not in a position per se, she has a level of bravery that exceeds, let's call it, most of our detectives across the nation. Of course, there's cops that stood up to this, and we can't talk about them all here today, and they all got suspended, they all got fired, they all got moved out, but we have Natasha here today with the bravery to come and help the cops. So there's a group of Edmonton police officers that have been diligently working behind the scenes, fighting the injustices, really, of what happened to them over the lockdowns. And Natasha did a FOIP request on our behalf because she's there to help the cops.
I couldn't help but get chills a couple of times there with some of the things you were saying, Rick. And it's so true. Courage begets courage, and at the end of the day, right and wrong is a responsibility that all of us are beholden to, and it's not, there's no rule set in stone that we have to stop being working together just because of job description when it's about our communities and where we live and the people that matter to us, the things that should matter to everybody. And what you basically described there was, I wish it was shocking news, but it's not. It's a pattern that we have heard repeated time and time again. We have had so many officers and former officers that have shared with us their journey through all of it, and I hate to say again, it's such a pattern, and this is something that I think that's important. This was the pattern that you experienced with the Edmonton Police Services, which is really no different than members in Saskatoon Police Services that I've interviewed, Winnipeg Police Services, RCMP, Ontario, the exact same pattern of abuses. I hate to use the word systemic, but at this point, that's exactly what we've established. There's systemic abuse. Where does that come from? Justice is a way slower moving thing than most people have the patience for. We have this instant expectation of results when we get emotionally disturbed, and that's not the case. And that's where people like Natasha are so critical. And we all have very particular skill sets, and it takes everybody to fight back with and engaging those skill sets in different capacities. So, both of you guys have exhibited such commendable courage still at this point, and this is not to be understated, the fortitude of people to still be standing, still be talking, still be doing at this point of the abuse where, I see today Pfizer saying, oh, we're sorry, and just thinking it's all going to go away. That's, I think, is unacceptable, and people need to continue to keep diving and getting into some of the answers of how did this happen? How do we stop this? How do we recognize it? How do we establish it? To me, pattern is intent, premeditation. How does this change the environment of discussion? Uh, I guess we start with any of those, Natasha, and start. Where we're at here with a report, I guess, is a good place to start. Time to bring that in.
Yeah. So just to give the people an idea of what we did here is the police officer had already started to work on that freedom of information request. And we just, once they connected with me, we fine-tuned it and asked for more. And have to touch on the cost. These guys gave them an astronomical cost for these documents. Like it was ridiculous. It was close to $7,000 at the beginning was what the estimate was. And I look at that as quite a significant deterrent fee, which is unfortunate. In the end, it was just under $5,000, I believe. And anyways, so there's this deterrent for trying to get the information. And they even went through the process. So most people would go, well, what steps did they do before that? And really, the officers sought every possible avenue. Right from the beginning, right from day one, when things were happening and they were noticing that things were not lining up. So you have to remember, a lot of our police officers are former military. They're highly trained in biochemical weapons. They're highly trained themselves as police officers for biologics, for any type of contaminants they might come across. So this isn't new for them. So the response from the beginning actually raised flags, and people were constantly sending memorandums into supervisors. They were questioning occupational health and safety, asking for data, asking for information, explaining that the masks wouldn't work because of the particle size. These are well-educated, very informed group of people going to their employer and trying to get answers the whole time, and then questioning the things that were being put onto the communities. So
I just have to ask one question here, because this obviously didn't happen in a minute. So when this is stuff that you're outlining here that you were into after getting together with the officers that were initially starting to do this, to set a timeline on this, because I think it's important for people to understand when did this start. Like, I mean, years matter here now. There's years in between where we're at now with you guys having this final report and analysis versus where this started in looking for the information.
Yeah, so they started at the beginning. They were looking for the information in, essentially they looked at it for their spring AGM with their union when they weren't getting answers from their employer. And that was in 2023, I believe it was March, if I'm correct, Rick. And they went to their union looking for them to do an investigation, to look at what was going on, to get answers for them, to support those who had been vaccine injured as well, or those who are off because of other COVID-related harms or mental health harms. And so that started for them, and they approached me in early August to assist them. So August of 2023. And
Well,
yeah. So their freedom of information requests went in. They got revised. Again, they tried again to get the association, which is their union, to support them. Even the association was very generous. They allowed me to come and speak and give a presentation at a special meeting, and try to encourage getting that support, which Obviously, it didn't happen. These guys ended up paying out of pocket to get these documents. And it was so important because they knew that that disclosure would be relevant to public interest. And so that's a huge component of the push forward. It wasn't just for themselves, but they knew whatever was happening, everybody was reluctant to address it, to answer questions, to provide evidence. And that, again, a lot of the officers that I've spoken to expressed that that was a concern for them. And so this was just a group of officers. It was also civilian, EPS civilian staff that were joining in and trying to get answers here. So we got documents November 1st. I guess October 31st, I opened them on November 1st. We got the first batch, which was just about 6,000. And then got the second batch the middle of December of 2023, which was the remainder. So it came to just under 9,000 documents from the Edmonton Police Service. And the evidence in there is, it's all in their own words. They put everything on paper. And there are omissions that we're still trying to get through the Privacy Commissioner.
So I have a couple of questions here on this. Who exactly are the gatekeepers of this information, and who gets to determine where, in public interest, we have a right to know what the hell is going on, what was said by people we ultimately are taxed for their wages for? They're supposed. I'm just trying not to get into the frustration side of it, but the gatekeepers, is that an activist organization at this point?
No, that would come from the privacy group and then it's approved. So all these larger requests would go through the supervisors in the privacy office within EPS as well. It probably went through a legal review and potentially others in leadership. Rick, you might have some other.
So this is within the Edmonton Police Service is my point. So that's a different altogether than, say, provincial police or the RCMP. There's no interconnectivity with this. This is just with the Edmonton Police.
I can't speak to this specific request, but I will tell you, in my experience, a request as important as this would have gone through up into including the chief of police, and his lawyers will have vetted exactly what Natasha got. This is a leadership thing that we're talking about today.
That's an important distinction, I think, for people to understand in this, for sure.
Yeah.
So where 9,000 documents, holy macaroni, Natasha, that's like a room full of documents.
Yeah, it's bins. Especially, I'm a paper person, so it was substantial. And really, the information that they provided is, well, you've read some of the information there, and it's substantial. And it was also, I like to make a note because it was not well organized, and that's why the original Freedom of Information request is attached with the full document, because there was no real way for me to address that. As well, the original evidence is what people need to see. So I wanted it to be released in its complete format, as well as what was presented. So that evidence hasn't been touched by me.
Well, I obviously, I'm not getting through 9,000 documents. You did a summary on it. I think even that is 47 pages, and I got to fess up, I only got a couple pages into it, and I was so infuriated by what I had gotten through. Even at that point, where do we start, Natasha? Because let me know now. I'm going to go back and read that here over the weekend. How many times am I going to have to pause because I'm equally frustrated and upset at what I read?
And this is the reason why the full report is I mean, it's available to the public, but it's a limited circulation. Number one, there's a lot of names in there, and you don't know what people's specific roles were or anything behind that other than their name is included in an email. So you don't want to be pointing fingers at people or having any really significant personal implications to them. So that's why I did the summary that doesn't have names of individuals in it, just positions. But I think the most important thing really for people to understand is the evidence exists in those documents that laws that exist in our country from a provincial, federal, or international level have been openly broken. And there's communication in those documents that shows the open breaking of laws by those in positions of authority. And it is infuriating. I've even with when I released it to the group of police officers and the civilians, I said, be gentle with yourself reading this, because it's one thing to think they've done this, but there's a reason disclosures are not being released. And it's because when people see it on paper, it's hard to see. Even if you think, you still have that hope that maybe they didn't actually do this and know they were doing it, but they knew. They knew exactly what they were doing. They demonstrated on paper. They have the open discussions with government, with other chiefs of police, there's all types of communication in this document that shows that they had knowledge of what they were doing. And knowing that it wasn't lawful what they were doing, and asking the public then to do where the police were being utilized to gain voluntary compliance in our communities. And that's completely inappropriate.
I could use a lot stronger language than just inappropriate language that's connected directly to things like Nuremberg, and those kinds of actions, and it's terrifying to me, and I think you guys are going to have the set a new record here to get my second video removed from Rumble by disclosing this. The first one they removed was literally me publishing the head of the Teamsters union telling their union leads that we know this is illegal, but the boss is Trudeau's buddy, we're doing it anyway, kind of statements. That's ultimately, at the end of the day, a pretty close comparison to what's contained within this ultimately.
Well, that's unfortunate, because the information that's in my report, the information that was presented to us in those FOIP documents is it's public information, and it was released with significant omissions around very specific timelines. And so the fact that they felt that this was the least harmful information to release, is quite concerning. If Rumble wants to remove you for having this truth put up,
that's actually a challenge. To be honest with you, Natasha, that's a challenge here. Hold my beer. We're doing this. What are you going to do about it? Because I am the consummate whack-a-mole, and I will not be silenced to any capacity. That's a challenge they don't want to see how far I'm willing to take. Rick, how does this make you feel? This has to have been such a roller coaster for you.
That's a great segue. I've never professed to be a tough guy, actually, and I don't want to turn into that sandstone carving by looking back too much. But I did listen to Natasha's first presentation when she talked to a group here in St. Albert just about a week ago with Jamie Saleh was the interviewer there. And I walked away from that, Natasha. We haven't spoke about this. I walked away from that hurt. That's the only word I can come up with. You're right. And I think I think it's water off a duck's back with me, but reliving that is reminding me of the damage that they did to my people. So if I was mad in 2022 or in 2021, it all came back when I first heard Natasha's first talk about it, and the blatant disregard for people's privacy rights. Even it did hurt, and so there's my feelings on it. It was interesting to hear Jamie Saleh's take on it too. She was asking blatantly, where's the cops on this? Why are more cops not outright talking about what happened inside the workplace? And that's nothing we're going to deal with here. There's nothing we could deal with that night either, because that's a complicated topic. And I've been, for the past 2 years, trying to discover how we could encourage our police officers to have the courage to speak out against it. And in fact, I've been debating the difference recently between courage and bravery. So I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth here. The people I work with are horribly brave. These are, because I work in patrol services here, they go out every day and run towards the gunfire. And yes, I'm talking about gunfire in Edmonton. Apparently those gun laws aren't working. Another topic. The bravery of these cops on the street of running towards the gunfire. And I've, in my mind, have been differentiating the difference between that and standing up like Natasha has, or like the handful of cops that stood up across the nation. But in the end, I think cops are no different than the rest of the population. And pick a vocation. How many preachers stood up? How many teachers stood up? It's the same. There's a paucity of people like Natasha who had the courage to speak out against it. And I understand the frustration with Jamie's questions, because believe me, nobody's more angry about it than me. But we have to look ahead. We do have to move on, and that's why I think it's going to become a leadership topic of who is going to say, at a minimum, oops. And I'm not talking about Pfizer rather. Who's going to say, holy cow, we messed that up. How are we going to avoid that in the future? And I'll just give you a little hint, nudge, wink, wink. It's in the charter. Mm-hmm. We need somebody who will stand up for the charter in all of these institutions, including the police.
Well, that's one of the other patterns I think that people are establishing out of this here is again, the solution comes from, leadership. It's the same pattern, whether you were in the medical field or the legal field or police. It doesn't matter what field you were in. If you were in a position of public interest, this was perpetrated on everybody. And, it's important for me, and I want to elaborate on this. When I got so outraged, Natasha, with reading that document, I wasn't enraged at the police officers. I was enraged because of the police officers that all of a sudden I was seeing through a very different lens in understanding how badly they were victimized and abused by the overreach and the crimes. They're the victims of the crimes as well. And this is such a critical thing for us to understand. People say, how do we get here? How do we get here? It's because we separate ourselves from some of those very specific things, the humanity behind it. We have to maintain our humanity and work collectively and encouraged through courage. I completely understand the courage versus bravery thing. Rick, I spent a whole bunch of years in industrial fire and rescue, and thought because I was the guy running that way when everybody else was running that way, that made me brave. No, that was easy. I was out all the training in the world to do that, no matter what the crisis. What we're doing here right now, is a new level of courage that I can only aspire to every single day. Thank you to people like you that exemplify that every single day and find their way onto my platform here gets to meet the community. So very grateful for you guys in doing what you're doing with this. It can't be easy. I know y'all didn't ask for it, neither did I, but yet here we are. So let's do the best we can with what we got, where we're at, right? And I think that getting this report out is important for people to understand that if they're going to look for transparency and accountability, they have to be armed with the facts.
That's right. And, you know, I think there's a really big key point to what you just went through and talked about, is that the public needs to know. The public needs to know that these officers there's more good in there than the few rotten. It's just like any profession. You've got a few rotten apples in the group, or people willing to violate somebody else's, privacy or their charter rights or whatever that might be. And that's just not the case. These officers today are still fighting this. They are still being demoted. They are still being persecuted in the workplace. They are targeted by their employer. And if they speak up, and this isn't just Edmonton Police, I've now talked with officers all over the country because
coast to coast
of this.
Every modality and discipline and expertise within every force in an agency, military included. There is somebody that I know that I can go and talk to that will talk to me, but they can't speak to the public.
Yeah, they're silenced. They have no voice. If they speak out, they're immediately gone or put on unpaid leave. And the battle still continues. People go, oh, COVID's over. And where were our police officers? But the reality comes in is that if the police officers are even try to launch an investigation that is deemed to kind of go into this pandemic realm, some of them have been threatened with Form 10s, which is a psychiatric hold. And so there is substantial harm to these people. And everybody says, well, why don't they leave? Why don't they just leave and take a stand? Well, who takes their place is the better question that I ask them when I get asked.
And that's the easy question to ask, who takes their place. What people don't even want to think about then is, what do they do? Because now you are completely unemployable and you are counseled. You are effectively genocided yourself from functioning in society in any capacity if you ask a question or say no. And most people, no matter, again, the job or the career that they have, cannot withstand that.
Yeah. And Rick and I have both experienced that. We are blackballed in our fields of practice. And I'm okay with being blackballed because, taking a stand sometimes requires that there's some hardship with that. And it's brought some pretty amazing things out of it. But, one thing that's really important here for people to know is that we can't have any accountability. We can't have any justice while our police officers are shackled from being able to do their job. If somebody brings them a concern, a complaint, information that they need to investigate, they need to be able to do that. And it doesn't matter what the topic is. It doesn't matter whether it's COVID or not. If they're shackled by leadership saying, no, you're not going to do this, we don't want you to do this part, that would not be politically good for us if we do it, or the government direction for that. That needs to stop. Our governments need to get out of the way, because police should be oversight for the government as well.
So right? I have to ask this, and I already know the answer. I guess it's kind of a rhetorical question, but what's it going to take for we, the people, to force the corruption at the leadership at whatever jurisdiction and region they are to stop holding our police officers hostage? Because it's not just handcuffed. They are literally being held hostage by captured leadership. That's my assessment.
I might have a two-part answer for that for you, Wayne. The first part of allowing police officers' independence to do those investigations that Natasha's talking about can be watched live right now in Ottawa with the Helen Grews case. So this is the courageous lady that was investigating a linkage between increased infant mortality in Ottawa at the time that the COVID drugs were coming out, and she got hardcore canceled, right? So she's being run through the ringer against a plethora, a team of lawyers from the Ottawa Police Service, hoping to hold her guilty of acting beyond her set duties, where at the time she actually worked in a child at risk unit. So that's part one, and that can be watched right now. This is a very important case that Canadians need to be interested in. If
Donald Best has really been covering that in depth, and I do believe that there's a hero poll running to support her, and I think that you're right. This is critical for people to get involved at this level of these kinds of things, because they want to literally criminalize her for doing something that we should be rewarding and giving her medals and awards for stepping above and beyond. These are the things that our culture used to reward, not criminalize. And I think it's just you're right, 100% one of those cases and things that we need to exert the court of public opinion on.
Let me make fun of Helen here for a minute. I've gotten to know her over the past few months a little bit, just on the phone. She wasn't going above and beyond her duty. She was doing her job.
Well, enduring this lawfare is above and beyond the scope of duty, though.
And which is another good segue, though, into our leadership. And I keep on coming back to this. This is top-down stuff. Whether or not we're going to have accountability, let's talk with the police agencies over these chiefs and deputy chiefs that actively hurt their employees. I don't know. But what I can say is that moving forward, we have to have leadership that is going to outright say that we're going to run this organization as per the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. We're going to treat our employees the same way, and they're all going to be dealt with under the charter the same as the civilians. We should be investigating the crime in our communities equally based on how the charter reads. This isn't complicated. We're making it complicated by not following the rules. And call me a simpleton, maybe we need some simple leaders that you're going to say, we're just going to do our jobs as it's outlined by the Charter of Rights and Freedoms.
Well, I think that would make things so much better, without the political influence over. Or I guess it's kind of up for question whose actual influence over politics and leadership and jurisdiction all across the country, depending on which detachment I guess you might stumble into in what city. And I'm sorry, I'm kind of mocking the activist capture of everything, including law enforcement, and it's would be just that simple. Helen should be an instant nomination for the new commissioner's job in whatever posting she should choose. Yeah. And that's maybe what we should be looking at this. We need to stop fighting with the police and arguing with the police and start protecting the good police and holding the bad police in leadership to account, because the machine will move much better if we're doing that than if we're just opposing and looking at every officer as the enemy. That's leading us down a very scary path, and that's, I think, exactly where they're intentionally trying to push us to, because this government wants to go full Stasi on us with the jackboots and lock us down into our homes on house arrest for thinking that natural gas might be good, or that we might think about saying something bad down the road. And I don't think that they would be able to hold hostage enough officers to keep us in compliance. So they want us to give them justification, and that's what we cannot do. And that's what I think is so important about what you guys are doing, is shedding a little bit of light on where that is, in particularly in Edmonton. What are some gold nuggets? We're kind of getting down to the end of the hour here, and I've kind of had you guys in the weeds in every different kind so far here today. So I want to make sure that you guys get everything out here today that you feel that the people need to know that they can move forward on with a little bit.
Natasha, can we talk you into giving an example of one of the outrageous exchanges that we saw in the 9,000 pages?
Which one?
I think for Wayne's crowd.
That's how you sell a book, Natasha, even when it's free.
for Wayne's crowd, maybe you could explain that that email exchange between a certain level of leadership talking about how their expectations of who would be sickened by COVID versus who was not would be an easy one.
That's a very good one. So my report kind of addressed more than just the vaccines. It addressed chemical exposure. It addressed lack of OHS. It addressed all sorts of stuff. But I broke it into the sections. So one section though does deal with the COVID vaccinations. And we were into December 31st of 2021. And this is an exchange in the chief's emails between senior leadership. And so they were checking on numbers at this point. So they had already put in their vaccine protocol. There was the testing group. And this was the exchange. It was, that they're checking on the numbers for vaccinated versus unvaccinated to see their positive cases for the day. So who had a positive test result? That's a whole other thing. And the response they got was, they'll give another perspective on today's numbers, and they can tell that there's 51 active COVID cases in the organization. 47 of the members are vaccinated and 4 are not vaccinated. They actually go on to say, I think we may have believed the opposite would be true. Comments back were interesting, that 51 to 47, you have them trying to determine, well, what are the symptoms that these guys have? Is there any way that we could use this to increase vaccine rates? This is the conversation that's going on. If there's a difference, right from the chief of police, if there's a difference, then perhaps we can inform to possibly increase vaccination if that's the case. So they inquired then to the occupational health and safety nurse to find out individual members' symptoms. That's their personal medical information. That's protected information, but they wanted to see, and then they came back and said, we have some triple vaccinated members who have been hit hard and some unvaccinated that have mild symptoms. Most common are fatigue, headache, and sore throats. It seems that the unvaccinated are not any worse off than the vaccinated folks. This being December, they then carried on.
Wasn't sure if we'd get all the way through.
She was telling stories that the internet doesn't want to hear.
That's again. I started the show off with that. That's why we do this to so many different platforms. She'll probably be back in just enough time to make it, unwatchable for some of the community out there. But this is. I wish again it was startling and appalling. Being in the field that I'm in, I can probably express things in a different capacity than what you guys might be able to. But for me, I hope she'll find her way back in. To me, I would look at the story of the Edmonton police officers as victims of a targeted bioweapons assault. That's how I describe in a nutshell what this report ultimately says in a sentence.
While Natasha is frozen up there, I can summarize for you in that exchange and emails that she referred to. The investigators that I used to work with in West Division would have called all of that info they had there a clue. And nobody acted on those clues, except not nobody. That's not fair. Again, of course we've had multiple police officers across the nation doing it and being chastised for it. Shout out again to the ones that have been making the news. And my take, Wayne, is for everyone we're seeing on the news that's been chastised by their local agencies, there's a lot behind them that don't make the news.
Well, there's so much that I think we're just beginning to get to the meat and potatoes of the discussions, and I'm
so
you were warned. I gave the disclaimer at the beginning.
So, that was reading directly from their email chain, directly, word for word. If somebody doesn't like it on there, I'm sorry, guys. Too bad. I'm going to keep reading from the email chain, because that is horrendous discussion for these guys to be having. Sorry, that just irks me. I mean, wow.
I wish I could say that it was unexpected, and I for me to paraphrase, I paraphrase a little bit more pragmatically than what you guys might, and I had described it to Rick as basically my verdict out of what I just heard, even there, just with that alone, was that the Edmonton police officers were are the victims of a targeted bioweapons assault, premeditated, and not typical. That always happens. The reality of authentic live broadcasting, right?
Yeah.
So that's unfortunately for me to break it down into one assessment. That's what it is. But I keep wanting to not forget, Rick. You mentioned there was two things. There was two parts to that question. And the first answer was Helen Grew, and I went off in the weeds again.
No, I touched on it. The second part is the leadership. I do believe there's a way out of this, and it's going to take a lot of courage in leaders and policing specifically to say we made a mistake. The solution to this I think is easy. As I said earlier, it's to simply follow the charter until such a time that the charter has been suspended. We have courts. There's a system that can be suspended if the courts agree that it's so for the safety of Canadians. Until the charter is suspended, it's easy for police to simply point at a copy that they have on the wall and say, sorry, sir, we're not enacting any of those rules that violate the charter until you have a court that suspends us. Suspends it.
Right.
Yeah.
And so does this, is this something that we can, how do we bring this to whatever level of leadership in a capacity? How do we get that message to them in a way that doesn't get us smashed as feral, dangerous Canadians, but that can effectively, lean on them to create a cure, or at least address it? Because I think that's ultimately what this opens the door for, is forcing that conversation. Now we have to have this conversation. It's in the air now.
There's hope here in Alberta, in the province, at the provincial level anyway. I from what I'm watching, I see that there is an appetite for change within the province of Alberta, with the use of our sheriffs, and leadership there is obviously looking at things differently from what I'm seeing in the municipalities. At the municipalities, for instance, the big cities, Edmonton and Calgary, what you're asking for is a real problem, because the commissions who do the hiring, they're to act as an arm's reach buffer between the political level at the city level and the law enforcement agencies. They do the hiring. So I can only describe the Edmonton Police Commission at the time that they fired me. They were infiltrated with social justice warriors. They were not there for law enforcement. They weren't there to make Edmonton a safer place. They were pushing ideologies very specific to their niche. So to your listeners, we need people to take over our local commissions. In Ontario, I think they refer to them as, what do they call them? And the police services boards. They act the same way as our commission. So those are the people that do the hiring of our chiefs of police. We need people who want pragmatic answers to law enforcement to take over those positions. And so politics is local. Get involved at your local level. Until we change those, though, don't expect any changes here in Edmonton with social justice warriors doing the hiring of law enforcement. Won't work.
I think very much so. You said something that I think that's critical for people to understand, that policing has also been captured by these activists, and these activists are all led by lobbyists and carrots in faraway places. In Geneva, the Geneva Stasi group leads all of that. And this globalism, the cure for the globalism is localism. And you gave us exactly what I'm looking for out of that for an answer. Where do people plug in to that localism to affect change? And that's at the Police Services Board, and they do have the ability to make an impact in organizing civilly and responsibly and peacefully, using the correct language and information to make an impact on that. And that's something that I think people could effectively organize behind and achieve, without having, the entire population of Edmonton come behind it, or turning this into a political discussion and getting lost in the emotions. I think you've given a real opportunity for people in the West to embrace and take it anywhere in the country.
Yeah. And people need to, there's another part to this action. People also need to get their voices out there. They often sit on social media, and that's a great place to voice things, but you actually need to go and see your MLA, see your MP, let them know you're not happy with what's going on, and let them know your concerns, because the information actually doesn't make it to them. They have gatekeepers. And unless you can get around the gatekeepers, then they don't actually hear what is going on in their community. So you have to make that effort to talk with them. And I think with the police side is anybody who's a business owner should be really upset about how the law enforcement was used during this event. And it won't be just this event. This was just one of many events where the police will be used, if they're allowed to be used, to put in measures and get voluntary compliance from people, or force, because lots of people were scared. They were scared that the police were going to come knock on their door and force their business to do something. And I think business owners should get together and address that.
That's that could lead into a whole other discussion. My friend Lanny, she tabled a principle a number of years ago on the inversion of law in our society, and that's something that we really have to embrace and understand in order to reverse engineer the process of fixing it and reestablishing that. And you guys are definitely thought leaders in that regard, in helping us, arming us with things that we can, make the discussion more articulately, the argument more articulately, because at the end of the day, we're up against a machine that is programmed, and it has no capability to respond. So keep moving forward. I think we're on the right path. Not expecting instant gratification, I think, is a key thing for people. And the other part of it is exactly that: action. We need action. We need rational, calm, logical action, not emotional outbursts. That's how we end up in a revolution rather than a renaissance. I would way rather have a renaissance where we come into alignment based on information, knowledge, and community. And that takes action with the information. Rima, Dr. Rima says, education, information is one thing, but if you don't engage action, you'll be the most educated corpse in the slave graveyard. And she's not really far off on that. So thank you guys so much for all that you guys are doing, and some last final thoughts before I let you guys go and we get out of here.
Go ahead, Rick.
Thanks for having us. This is important. I just want to reiterate how important it is that Canadians watch what's going on in Ottawa with Helen Drew's case. It's a fascinating story, and I hope that we end up with a movie out of it one day and it all works out the way it should. Thanks, Wayne.
I'm talking to so many movie people these days too. So everything happens for a reason. So you never know, Rick, what might come down the pipe. But Canada has become quite an interesting subject matter for all kinds of movie makers. So we're definitely leading the way in something, and that's craziness. So people want to make movies about crazy. So come on down to Canada. We've got a few for you. So fantastic. Awesome. Natasha.
I think a good takeaway is that there's a lot of information out there, and it's not all backed up with a lot of evidence. But what the document that I've provided and the courage of the officers who have spent hours talking with me, over 100 hours talking with officers who have been harmed and been financially decimated and all of that, the courage that they've had to keep doing this, to make sure that we had actual evidence. Like, this is something that's been missing. And I think it's really important that people look and see that we have to have this type of evidence to make change and to hold some of those people accountable when we're able to, and move down that pathway. And I think our communities need to really stand and push for that and support each other as we do it, because it's not going to be easy. It's going to be brutal. Like you said, reading just a few pages is brutal. And you weren't the subject matter, right? So,
right. I wasn't even feeling victimized. I was angry at the police that that they had turned into victims, because that's not how I want to think about our police officers and agencies of protection out there. If they're vulnerable, that's a terrifying thought.
Yeah, they're people. And they got it from their communities, and then they got the absolute beat down at work, and that was intentional. And when they take off their uniform, they just want to make sure they go home to their families and can provide for their families, just like everyone else. Like, everybody suffered that, but the additional beat down, I have actually never seen more abuse in a workplace than what I witnessed with this. And I haven't even interviewed all the officers, just the ones that have had the ability to speak with me. Some are too traumatized to even talk about it. Well, so I think we need to stand behind them, really need to get behind these guys.
If we want to encourage them to protect us and stand for us, love has to be the default position, because if you beat me up too often, there's no fucking way I'm doing anything for you. Excuse my French. Yeah. And that's, the bottom line of it. So I think it's reality check time. It's gut check time. And people should eliminate the noise and go and read a thriller. I will provide a link to said thriller, my recommended reading of the week. I'll be publishing a Substack with that in it. So find me on Substack, find me on any of our platforms, guys, and give people some hope and understanding and some accurate information to make the arguments with, and we'll see everybody else out in the trenches lining up their letters to their police services board on what they expect from their police services board, and whether that's them setting up other freedom of information requests or being agents of educated change. I think that we've covered all the bases today, guys. So thank you so much for having the courage to come and sit and talk to the fringe majority community out here for a little while today.
Well, thanks for having us.
And thanks again, Natasha, for coming to help the investigators. We appreciate it more than you know. Thank you.
You're welcome. You guys are amazing. So it's my pleasure to serve our officers.
Fantastic, guys. And when there's some updates or things to move on, I'm sure you guys will come back and join me, won't you?
Most definitely.
You bet.
Fantastic. All right, guys. Wow, my head's racing again. This is some some of the most inspiring people in the last couple of shows here that we've had the opportunity to introduce you guys to out there, and I hope people will take some of the lead on some of this, and that's kind of what we're hoping to do with each of the shows that we move forward on here. Is at the end of the show, I hope you guys want to or feel like there's something more that you can go and do or read or look at that might be a tool that you can add to your toolbox or know somebody that can use. So it's a good time for all of that right now, guys. And we're getting it streamlined onto some places that this information, you'll be able to find it permanently without fear of what Lord Farquaad intends for you for accessing said information. So find your courageous streak, stay strong, stay fierce, stay proud, stay Canadian. Tune in tomorrow and Saturday for what will also be, I'm sure, insanely compelling programs. And we'll see you all tomorrow.